everyone, and welcome to the Cinematic Schematic, the official podcast of the Cinematropolis.com, your home to thoughtful conversations on film. I'm your host, Caleb Masters, and today we are powering up because this one's for the gamers. All the gamers on the internet just raged at me for using that phrase. We're breaking out the D20 dice and also those classic Nintendo controllers and perhaps even a bag of Funyuns. Again, nerds are mad at me for the cliches. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. We are doing a double feature review in this week's episode. We're going to be covering Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves and the Super Mario Brothers movie. We'll start with a couple of icebreaker questions, the first of which is really just talking with me and Laron about our thoughts on Ben Affleck's new movie, Air, before we jump into a spoiler-free review and verdict on Dungeons & Dragons. And then we'll move into a spoiler-free review and verdict on the Super Mario Brothers movie. And then we'll close out the conversation in what I like to think of as a Super Smash Brothers style showdown, where we pick the movie that we're going to recommend to the listeners. If you only have one, which one do you pick? And joining me today, he's not a gamer, but he is my friend. And I'd like to think that one day we could play a co-op game together. I'm so excited to welcome award-winning Oklahoma filmmaker and my co-host on the Cinematic Schematic, Laron Chapman. Laron, welcome back, sir.
What does Mario do? The Mamma Mia.
Can we take a shot every time this movie says Mamma Mia? It would be trash. That's what the adults need to do. Okay.
I'm not a gamer, but I'm I'm very much, an appreciator of the form, and as of lately, we've been seeing some great things come out of games like The Last of Us on HBO. So I'm starting to open my mind to that world. I definitely had some, a relationship with it as a kid. And so it's nice to kind of see how that's evolved over time in terms of, cinematic adaptation.
They burned through all the comic books. They realized the comic book market was
the new frontier?
Was heading to a dark place. So they said, "What's next? We gotta crack video games, guys." And thus we got the Super Mario Brothers movie. I'm also super excited to welcome back. It's been way too long, frankly. Caleb Haldane, the host of the Red 6 podcast. He's also super involved here in the Oklahoma's biggest convention, SoonerCon. Caleb Haldane, it's been since Godzilla versus Kong, sir. Way too long.
That long. Wow. That's way
Welcome
too long.
back.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really excited to talk about both of these properties because I think I have a lot to say about both of them. I think it's going to be a fun trip of hitting nostalgia and, something new.
Yeah, I think that's the sweet spot. Can these movies both be nostalgic and something new at the same time? And can they do it in a form that makes for some compelling, what's the word, air quotes, cinema? Now, listeners, before we get to today's review, I wanted to note that if you're listening to the show and you're enjoying our conversation, please support us by subscribing and leaving us a rating and review on your preferred podcast app. I've been rolling a lot of ones with the reviews, i.e., I'm talking about Dungeons & Dragons reference. I could really use some 20s or even a 15. Give me a 4 out of 5 on either any of those platforms. I'll take it. Again, that's the best way you can support the show. With that said, before we get into the topic at hand specifically, I wanted to pause and talk about a movie Laron and I both were able to see. I did get invited to go see Ben Affleck's new movie, Air.
1984 has been a tough year. Our sales are down, our growth is down.
Sonny, I brought you in here to grow the basketball business.
People don't know what the hell a Nike is.
What's a Converse?
NBA All-Star shoe.
There's nothing cool about Nike.
You would have to have a pretty compelling pitch.
I can tell them the one thing the other companies can't compete with. Our basketball division is terrible.
I do not love it.
This is the film co-starring and directed by Ben Affleck about how Nike landed the deal with Michael Jordan's family for the Air Jordan shoes. And Laron was, you also joined in at this press screening. And I just wanted to know, it's not a video game, but basketball is a game.
It is a game.
So technically, if you really wanted to twist it really far, you could say,
yeah.
I think more than that, it's a 90s nostalgic hit, right?
Yes.
There you go.
So I think actually these three movies do really kind of live in the similar sphere, even though none of them really touch each other. You know,
That's true, because they're all like because Dungeons and Dragons was really gained a lot of popularity in the 90s.
Yeah, 80s and 90s for sure, and then
Mario, and then Michael Jordan. I mean,
all of them, transitioned from the 80s to 90s.
Oh man, see synergy.
Absolutely. And if you want to talk about nostalgia, I mean, Air has got plenty of it.
I want to turn to you here, sir. What did you think of Ben Affleck's new movie, Air?
This is the quintessential dad movie. And and it's weird is I say that, as a feature, not a bug, surprisingly, because I really didn't have any interest in seeing this outside of the pedigree of the cast and people involved with it. This is not a subject. I'm not a sports person by any stretch of the imagination. And so that, I think, is why the film works so well, is because surprisingly there's a staggering lack of sports in this film, but it's because it's not about sports. It's about, you know what I mean? It has the sports cliches, like the kind of conventions you're used to seeing. Like it's structured like the underdog sports movie. But
the underdog sports movie set in corporate America, Nike,
where Nike is the underdogs that are like underplaying and have to like
they gotta take down the Adidas, the big guys, Adidas,
exactly.
and
in some weird way though it works. I think it's because the cast is so strong here. You got a really diverse cast. Nice to see Chris Tucker back in a movie. He's
always
hilarious. Steals a lot of scenes. Jason Bateman's quite good. Viola Davis can't do anything wrong. Ben Affleck is somebody I don't necessarily love as an actor in dramatic roles, but is great in comedic roles or weird, wacky roles, and he's really, great here as the CEO of
that's director, the CEO of Nike at the time, Phil Knight,
who's barefoot most of the movie, which just counters against the product that he's selling.
So Phil Knight, which by the way, it's funny, you would think if you didn't know and you watch the movie, you're like, this guy is way too cartoon. There's no way this is Ben Affleck is totally chewing it up. He is chewing it up, but also everything that the movie puts in, like in terms of he has a weird hairdo. He drives a very purple car. He walks around barefoot. Like all of these things. He's got this weird like Buddhist, like Americans twist on Buddhism. All of that is Phil Knight.
And it's weird. It is inspirational. It is like it's a good time. It's real breezy. It kind of breezes by. The comedy's real loose. Like I said, the cast is strong. So it's like whether you're a sports fanatic or an avid fan or you're not really into sports or what have you, it's just a good comedy. You know what I mean? And the cast is really strong again. So I had a good time with this. I think I gave this 4 stars, and it's very surprising if you told me this on paper what it was about, I would say not for me, but it really does kind of win you over, and you do feel bad for the corporate America that can't make a score. And I think it's because they lean on characters in this, and even the essence of Michael Jordan. He's never really seen.
That's the thing. He's never Michael Jordan. Like you never see his face in the movie, other than they do play like actual
some reels
footage of Michael Jordan, but you never see an actor playing Michael Jordan.
Yeah, there's someone there, but they only get sides of his face because it's really not about Michael Jordan. It's about
the idea
of
Michael
what he
Jordan
is and what he represents, and how they're capitalizing on that and how that revolutionized, the marketing for their shoes. Because. Before that, they were kind of swimming in the, the deep end, and now Jordans to this day are like, if you have a pair, you know what I mean, how much you shelled out for it, so it's definitely kind of an inspirational story in that way. So.
Yeah, so you're really positive. I'm also very positive. I'll try to hit on some things differently than you did. I did want to call out Matt Damon is technically the lead as Sonny Vaccaro, the guy who is actually trying to win a deal with Michael Jordan, more specifically Michael Jordan's mom, as played by Viola Davis. Really is she's like sort of the alpha in the family, and I think you hit it well. The performances are great. This is a great comedy. It's super funny. I didn't realize it was going to be this funny when I went into it, but man, there is some just like we were laughing
quite a bit.
Quite a bit.
There's a lot of one-liners.
Chris Messina. as David Falk, who is Michael Jordan's agent, has some of the best phone acting I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, on the phone shouting.
Just shouting obscenities, and it clearly is having a great time. That's the thing. Every actor here you can tell they're having a great time, but they're so good at their job. It's not like the fact that they're having a good time is a feature. You're like, but you still believe this is what the characters are doing.
Yeah.
A couple of small nitpicks, I would say. I didn't think it was possible, but there are probably just as many, if not more, needle drops than 2016's Suicide Squad.
Yeah.
I didn't think that was possible.
Yeah.
And like every scene, it's like you get 15
Every
seconds
transition.
of every 80s song from
Yeah.
that time is in this movie.
It's about a million a minute
It's
in
so
terms
many.
of the number of 80s songs that are featured in this. I was like, man, I want to see that. And at the end, when the credits roll, you look at every single, I'm like, man, this is
So
expensive.
many.
All the music licensing is going to be, expensive.
The movie is allegedly budgeted between $70 and $90 million. I want to say 20 million must have been
Just music. Just music, yeah.
I also just wanted to call out you referenced it earlier, the overuse of nostalgia. The movie goes out of its way several times to be like, remember the 80s?
Yeah.
Let's zoom in on all this 80s technology and 80s stuff.
This product and this, yeah, exactly.
And I really don't mind some of that,
Yeah.
especially they establish it at the beginning of the movie. They have a whole montage kind of like setting the tone. I was like, oh, that's appropriate. So now we know where we're at. And there's probably a lot of people who are seeing this movie who either weren't around in the 80s or were very young in the 80s. So it's kind of a good way to kind of, all right, this is the world we're in. It's a very different place where Air Jordans aren't dominating the marketplace.
Yeah.
But they don't just do it at the beginning though. They do it
they
throughout
press
the
the
movie.
gas the whole time.
Oh yeah, and it's a little
like-
obnoxious.
I agree.
It doesn't ruin the movie by any way, but it's just one of those like it. We're going to talk about this with the Mario movie, but remember this, the member berries from the South Park reference.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that, and I really thought Air was so good it didn't need that to be successful.
I concur. Well, and the last thing I'll say about it is also they kind of establish stakes, surprisingly, even in the realm of this, more personal stakes for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But about with each character, about what is at stake with, putting everything on the line for one player who isn't even interested in being here. You're the third choice and he doesn't even like your product, but them believing in the person and, and who he was as a player, Michael Jordan, this enigmatic like figure that everyone kind of could, even then and at that time can kind of, feel that his aura, how powerful of a presence he had, but we never knew just how long his legacy was going to be. So seeing all the characters, kind of taking, these huge risks, you know what I mean, to make a stake in that and not knowing if it was going to, they're going to sink or swim, it really does make us care about these individuals, even in this corporate realm,
Right. I mean, because their career, they are all they're all taking unprecedented risks.
If he says no, they're all going to lose their
a lot of
jobs.
people are losing their jobs. Yeah. Including the CEO, at one point. So the thing I'll add to that is, how do I know this is a great movie? Because at the end of the day, when you boil it down just on paper, the movie is telling the story of, can they give Michael Jordan a boatload of cash? That's the question. That's literally the premise of the movie. Are these going to be the guys who get to do it? But they are able to dramatize it in a way through some really great writing, some great performances, in a way where you kind of get lost in the story and you're like, oh man, like I'm feeling this. And you kind of forget for just for a minute. You're like, wow, yeah, well, we know they're going to be successful.
Yeah.
Right. The other thing I will say, and this is probably, some people have criticized this already as being a Nike commercial. I really didn't think of it this way. But I will say is I personally, as a person like yourself, who is not a basketball person, I mean, I know of Michael Jordan. I've watched The Last Dance. It's a tremendous documentary series. But I didn't realize that proceeds from the shoes weren't going back to players before this. So
You would have
apparently,
just
I just
assumed.
assumed, because that's the thing. They set the precedent where the shoes, every shoe sold under Air Jordans went to the player.
That was a fascinating revelation at this. This is where that started,
Yeah. That, and there was like a bunch of the rules, like they were like, oh, you can only have so much red on a shoe because it breaks some sort of NBA rule. And I was like, I had no idea. So they really did like swing for the fences, with this deal.
And now you look at shoes now, and you can see how flamboyant. The more colorful lime green, purple, whatever. You know what I mean? Like it is very interesting to see where that all started.
So you said you gave it 4 stars. What would be your letter grade if you were going to throw it?
I think I would go with an A- on this. I actually it has a lot of replayability. Like I'm actually excited to rewatch it, to see if the comedy holds up. But yeah, it feels like that kind of thing that you could put on in the middle of the afternoon and at any point and just start enjoying at any point of it. So.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, an A-, and it's one. It is exclusively in theaters right now, and I do highly recommend you see it on the big screen if you can find the time. But the other thing I'll say about it is this is really unique because Amazon is actually the studio distributing the movie, and they're uncharacteristically giving it a full theatrical run before it arrives on Amazon Prime Video.
Yeah.
So it'll be on Amazon Prime Video probably in a couple months, but I just want to reiterate, like, it's worth seeing in the theater, and I'm also want to applaud Amazon Prime Video for unlike Netflix, for actually approaching this more traditional model, because I think all of the hype this movie gets from the theatrical is going to drive viewability. I know I can't wait to show this movie to like 2 or 3 different people, including my dad.
Yeah,
So
including dad. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. So I'm right there with you. A-, highly recommend. We talked a lot.
Before we move on from it, I do have to say I've got a bone to pick with the trailer.
Okay.
And they drop, like, they showcase this one joke, like, it's so funny, and it doesn't actually work, and which is the, like, you want to drop this amount of money on a rookie who's never set his foot on the floor. And he's like, that's the definition of a rookie. That's not the definition of a rookie. Anybody within their first year of playing is a rookie. You can step foot on the floor and be a rookie. So it's like they hinge this whole moment in the trailer on this one joke that doesn't actually work, falls quite flat, actually, if you're talking to any sports fan.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
That's a good point.
And
I didn't catch it.
I didn't catch it because I'm not a sports person. Exactly. I know that is a trailer joke, and it doesn't super land. This movie's so much funnier than that trailer. The trailer,
I would hope so. The way you guys are talking about it, I'm getting that vibe. There's no way that the joke that they showcase in the trailer could be
that's like very minimal,
a throwaway, right?
And I thought the trailer was charming, but this movie is hilarious in a way that I did not expect.
Yeah,
that's good.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's move on to our icebreaker question. It's a little more inclusive since, Caleb's actually seen the movies. And today I'm having a little bit of fun. We're doing some sort of video game Mad Libs.
You can come off the bench now.
Yeah. We're done talking sports ball. Instead of posing a more general question, I want all of us to provide a video game franchise that you think should be adapted to the big screen, along with a director and a movie star attached to the project. For example, I'm not suggesting this is not my pick, but for example, just so people understand what I'm asking for, I want to see a Sonic movie directed by George Miller starring Tom Holland. I'll go first with my first one, and then we'll kind of go round robin until we run out of ideas. Control, a hit PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5 game directed by Nicholas Winding Refn, starring Megan Elizabeth Winstead. I would pay a lot of money to see that movie.
Yeah.
You could also go with David Lynch, but I feel like he's the obvious choice with that game. The game feels so David Lynch influenced that that's too obvious. So let's go with Refn, who most famously he did Drive, Only God Forgives, Neon Demon, a whole bunch of also Lynch inspired type aesthetics.
I actually don't think Lynch is a good call, but just because, like, when he deals in time, everything breaks down in a way that, like, is not conducive to it being like a major story driving point, right? Like, I think Control needs that time aspect so much that I actually don't think Lynch would be a good pick.
Okay, that's interesting, because when I was playing the game, I was like, this feels
Lynchian. So Christopher Nolan then.
Christopher Nolan,
he knows about time.
Yeah, he does. He does time better than Lynch, I think.
But see, he can't do that one because there's not a dead wife in that game. So unfortunately,
he would add one.
Even though it stars a woman, he would find a way to include a dead wife. Yeah. Okay. All right. Laron Chapman.
Yes.
What is your pick here? Or your first pitch?
It's funny you said David Lynch, because I'm going with Silent Hill, directed by David Lynch. I think he would have a good hold on the abstraction of that world, and I think it would be. But I don't have a star because I can't really think of. I didn't play the game, to be fair. I mean, I've seen
Chris Pratt, generic guy.
There you go.
Chris Pratt,
generic guy plays lead in this, but either way, it won't matter because it'll be David Lynch, and it's going to be all about what you're looking at, not the people in it. But I thought that was one example. And then the other one would be The Sims, any version of it, directed by Wes Anderson.
Oh, that's good.
I think he could play that.
And starring all of Hollywood.
Starring
the Asteroid City trailer that just came out this last week just told me apparently he can cast anyone in Hollywood at any time.
Yeah. So Wes Anderson, The Sims, starring everyone.
Everyone. Okay. All right. Caleb Haldane, what is one of your selections?
I'm going to go with Hollow Knight, done in like stop motion style with Tim Burton.
Oh,
But I'm,
can I like
Yeah.
fund this movie? Like, I would pay a lot of money to see that.
And I've got different takes on it, right? So if you want to go like comedy lighthearted, I think Josh Gad as your main
Yep.
guy.
Okay.
I think if you just want to play it like a real straight, like kind of PG-13-ish, then I would go Elijah Wood.
Ooh, that's great.
But if you wanted to make it real dark and kind of more adult themed, you stay in the same kind of universe as Elijah Wood, but Andy Serkis. I think he could do a dark version of Hollow Knight very well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Brooding, dark.
Yeah, exactly.
This is just that's a great, because listen, listeners, if you haven't played Hollow Knight, what are you doing with your life? It is an amazing game. It's really freaking hard though, but it's really good. That's a great, that whole is built around like kind of that gothic aesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, Tim Burton, that's a winner. Holy cow. Oh man. All right. So I'm going to go my next one, Horizon Zero Dawn, directed by the Wachowskis, starring Emma Stone. I know, I went for the redheaded actress. I couldn't help myself, but I love Emma
That's a
Stone.
good one. That's a good one.
I
We
like
like her.
Wachowskis,
Yeah.
and I think the Wachowskis have a really good grasp of sci-fi, but also understand character pretty well. So I think that you really need both of those things: high concept sci-fi plus a really solid grasp on characters that sort of thematically align with the story they're telling. So I feel like they are uniquely qualified for a Horizon Zero Dawn movie. Unfortunately, it's probably not going to happen because they are still at this point broken up as individual Wachowski siblings. But maybe one day I can dream.
Yeah. It's funny that you talk about characters in the Wachowskis because I always think of their characters as like very wooden and shallow to an extent.
Oh, okay. Caleb, are you questioning?
Hot takes.
No,
Hot takes.
I actually think that makes for a great video game character though.
Yeah.
Because video game characters are supposed to be the avatar for you, right?
Yes.
Like, so they typically are a little bit like that. I actually think they would be insanely good at doing a video game movie because of that.
Yes. So, yeah, I don't want to fight with you too much. You're right. Yes, I'm glad we agree on that. I
Yeah.
will say, maybe, and this speaks to my flavor of character work. I like intimate character dramas that are pure character, but I also feel like the thing I like about the Wachowskis is they're able to write characters that represent ideas, but also still feel enough like they're a human enough that I can relate to them. You know, I mean, we see this in The Matrix, obviously, but even Cloud Atlas, it's like, oh, these are real people. Clearly, they're using these characters to communicate a specific idea or philosophy or
theme.
worldview.
I guess I don't mean shallow. I mean like their characters are so tentpole-y, right?
Yeah. They're cliche. Yeah. Which, to your point, which actually is very
Which
good.
actually kind of works in a video game.
Bad guy, good guy.
Right. Yeah.
Archetypal.
Exactly. And then we can have Laron Chapman. Do you have any other picks?
Oh man, I think I've run out. That is where I draw the line. David Lynch and Wes Anderson is where I draw the line.
Okay. Caleb, do you have any other ones?
I don't either.
Oh man, I was the one who got obsessed with this game. Okay, God of War, directed by Ridley Scott, starring Jason Momoa. And I'm gonna go. I did this because if you've played the God of War games, you know that there's a massive shift after God of War in the continuity and the type of story they're telling after God of War 3, between God of War 3 and God of War 2018. And I think Jason Momoa could play both sides. The first three games are pure revenge flick. We actually talked about this in our John Wick Chapter 4 review. Pure revenge flick. There's not a lot to it other than that he really hates some gods and he wants to kill them. And then there's a big shift in 2018 God of War where he all of a sudden is old, is regretful, and has a son he's trying to bring into the world to have a happier life than he was able to have. I think Jason Momoa has the capacity to do both of those, and he's big and muscly, so, there's that. Red Dead Redemption, directed by Quentin Tarantino, starring Leonardo DiCaprio. That one actually felt like low-hanging fruit, but, I think Leonardo DiCaprio actually would be a really good John Marsden. Like, he's got that old, grizzled look to him. He's got he can play the cynicism really well, but you also still kind of like has that something about him that you just relate to, even though he's probably not a great guy. And, Quentin Tarantino has proven he's very capable of Westerns and quite likes Westerns. I know we're only going to get one more Quentin Tarantino movie allegedly, and it's definitely not going to be Red Dead Redemption, but
And it's definitely not going to be Kill Bill Volume 3, but whatever.
it's definitely not going to be that Star Trek movie that he was working on at one point allegedly. But, I just want to call it out because that would be pretty cool. And last up, most importantly, let me ask you guys, do either one of you remember the video game from the PS2, Xbox, GameCube generation? 50 Cent, Blood in the Sand?
No.
Does no one remember this?
No.
Oh, 50 Cent, man. You guys remember 50 Cent though, right?
Oh,
Like the
yeah.
rapper?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh man, no, yeah.
50 Cent had a video game called Blood in the Sand, and it was awful. But I would love to see 50 Cent. I don't even know what he's doing, if he's even alive. I think I heard he got arrested for some stuff. I don't know.
He's still here, but yeah, he's gotten in some trouble.
Okay, so he can get out of trouble by writing, directing, and starring in a film adaptation of his awful, awful, awful video game, 50 Cent Blood on the Sand. Listeners, what video game do you want adapted to the big screen? Oh, wait, Laron?
I think one just came to me. Street Fighter,
Okay.
directed by, the show, the Reservation Dogs.
Sterling Harjo?
Nope. The other one, the producer.
Oh,
Taika Waititi.
Taika Waititi.
Taika
Okay.
Waititi. Street Fighter, directed by him, starring every meathead actor. and Hollywood.
that could be a lot of fun.
That could be fun.
Yeah.
I can see the
Waititi.
quirkiness.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's a silly game, but it's Mortal
Yeah.
Kombat. We've already kind of gotten a couple of versions of that.
I think
so.
Street Fighter leans more into the quirkiness than Mortal Kombat, though.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
And I while you were talking about one just popped in my head, and now I can't not think of it. SSX Tricky, done by John Hughes, as a we need to save the ski hill.
the ski hill.
Oh, man.
yeah, you know, done that way.
The
but
corporate
it's-
America's
yeah.
coming to destroy the ski hill.
Yikes. I mean, I'd play it. I'd watch it.
Judd Nelson, bring him back.
Yeah.
Judd Nelson comes back. He's the corporate overlord. Bring him in. That's good. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, I don't think you're going to be able to top any of these picks. I know
There's
I'm
no
saying
way.
presumptuous, but if you think you can, send your pitch to me at thecinematropolis@gmail.com. I want to hear from you, and you'll have a chance to have those ideas read on the show. With all that said, let's jump into the first film we're covering today, which is Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves.
Here's the thing. We're a team of thieves. And when you do this, you're bound to make enemies. Sometimes those enemies come looking for revenge. Truth be told, we help the wrong person steal the wrong thing. We didn't mean to unleash the greatest evil the world has ever known. But we're gonna fix it.
So how do we pull that off? Figure it out over a drink?
Probably best.
According to IMDb, Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves is described as a charming thief and a band of unlikely adventurers embarks on an epic quest to retrieve a lost relic, but things go dangerously awry when they run afoul of the wrong people. There's a lot of words in that IMDb description. A couple of fun facts about this movie you might not know, listeners. This movie was directed by John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein. This is something I didn't realize. Their last movie was 2018's Game Night, which, by the way, is a wildly underrated comedy from that year. Check it out. It's a great movie. Another thing, as a box office prognosticator, I watch it. I have no real stake, but I'm always curious because how things perform tend to indicate what's coming in the pipeline in 2 to 3 years. Despite this movie, so great news is this movie made a lot of money at the box office. I say a lot. It overperformed on the expectations. So it was originally projected to make 30 million on the high end, but it actually came in at 38.5 million, which is good. However, the movie has a $150 million plus a large marketing budget to cover before it breaks even. So even though I think it's weird kind of watching like the headlines in general is like, hey, this movie's doing great, but you're like,
It was made for quite a bit.
it's pretty expensive. I mean, $150 million is not, it's not nothing. It's not, Avengers Endgame money, but it's also not nothing. It's pretty expensive.
Like it'll probably make its money back, but yeah, it's not going to.
Will it make enough to get a sequel is the big question.
Yeah.
And I think it needs to make around 400 to 450 before we can even have that conversation. And
This is where I'm going to disagree with you. Like, I don't think that I think they just needed to break even to justify a sequel here, because they really just needed to make sure that Dungeons and Dragons is solvent, right?
Right.
They didn't like the brand and like the people who will see it. That part is baked in. They just needed to see if they could break
They'd
even,
show up.
right? Yeah.
They'd show up.
And now they can like it's
Build
I think it's
on it.
all but a guarantee they're going to break even, right? Like when the streaming contracts come in and stuff, like they're going to break even. And so yeah, I think that will be enough to allow them to greenlight a sequel. It doesn't necessarily mean it's guaranteed sequel, but I do think that they didn't need to make money like some other it would be like now if a Marvel movie broke even.
This is more of well, it is an IP, but I mean, it's
but it is
proof of concept.
I mean, to your point, this is Dungeons and Dragons, which is actually both Dungeons and Dragons and the Mario movie. There's a couple different ways to look at it. The very hyper cynical businessy way to look at it is these are just really expensive commercials for the stuff. So to your point, if they sell more books, if they get enough people in the butts and seats, they've proven that people will show up.
Right.
They'll feel comfortable investing in more sequels.
Right. At this point, they want to see if they can launch off their own cinematic universe, right? And I think that they didn't have the same restrictions that Marvel did at the time, where it was like, you need to make money with Iron Man.
Yeah.
This movie did not need to make money, but it could not lose money.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now it'll be interesting to see, because it's about going to probably break even.
I think I'm confident it'll break even, definitely on the budget.
Yeah.
I'm curious if it's going to break even on budget plus marketing, which is quite expensive.
Oh, it's true, because it does have a huge marketing.
Yeah.
Like
It had its world premiere at South by Southwest.
Yeah.
That doesn't come cheap. And there was a huge marketing campaign around that.
Yeah.
And again, I actually think the advertising for this movie has been like exceptional.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest.
It's been everywhere.
Yeah.
In fact, I was a little oversaturated with it.
Totally.
Leading up to it.
They've been marketing this movie for 3-4 years, something like that.
Yeah, they've been talking about. Well, the actual marketing campaign really kicked off. They had a Super Bowl ad. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Like they've been going pretty hard. And here's the thing I will say: the trailer was so good. I actually was skeptical of this movie coming in, because you ever see, Laron, all of us, we've all seen where you see a movie where the trailer has all the jokes in it, or it has all the best moments, and you're like. And you show up and you're like, wow, that was the whole movie. I didn't even need to come see this. Mm-hmm. I was terrified going in because I actually thought the trailers were great. I laughed my way through all of them.
Yeah.
And it had just the right amount of everything. Going into this, I was very, very skeptical because the trailer's too good. Couple quick notes. I just want to note for listeners, this is actually the second Dungeons and Dragons film to get a theatrical release.
Oh,
did the sequel? I thought they were both direct to DVD.
Okay, you're right. The sequel of the 2000
There's
Dungeons
two
and Dragons.
sequels.
There is two sequels, but the third movie in that franchise was definitely direct. I kind of thought the second movie was in theaters.
Wikipedia, which of course my friend Wikipedia, which is a very reliable source that we all trust, right? Says that it was straight to DVD, but
it could be. I'm just going from memory, not even.
No, but you're right. You might be right. So listeners, you can correct me. And if Caleb, if you remember seeing it, man, I'm not going to argue.
I didn't see it. I thought I remembered seeing trailers for it, but it could have been trailers direct to DVD.
Mm-hmm. So there was a film we definitely know 100% was theatrically released in 2000.
Yeah.
The only actor in it you probably know is Jeremy Irons, who played a mage. And you know what? He's the one guy in that cast who understood the assignment and showed up. But Caleb was making a lot of faces.
I am.
Caleb, I haven't watched this movie in literally 20 years.
I decided to watch it before the D&D movie because I was like, how bad is it? Is it as bad as I remember? It might be worse than I remember.
Oh no.
Yeah, and Jeremy Irons, he's acting, but it's just like he's acting to a static camera, and it just doesn't do anything. It feels like you're out at Hafer Park recording somebody on a stage, that kind of acting. It does not feel at all like his best caliber work. And I don't know how much of it's his fault, and a lot of it is like framing and staging issues, but it is definitely makes him look this alone on an island type of weird acting going on.
It's not good.
No, it's rough.
13 when I saw it. I was one of those things I rented from Blockbuster. So and you know, if a 13-year-old watches it and says, you know what I mean? Like normally, you know, you're not as harsh of a critic at that age. You know what I mean? Like so normally, like, you'll accept anything if it's entertaining. But I remember not liking it then. So Marlon Wayans is in it.
Marlon Wayans is in it.
So you said recognizable people. There are two people in there.
Two people.
The main actor guy, I can picture him, but I have no idea who that guy is. Like, why did they not, like, if they're going to get Jeremy Irons and Marlon Wayans, why didn't they actually go with a real deal lead?
Well, that's what I'm wondering too. Justin Whalen is the lead actor, but that's what I'm saying. If you're able to get a couple of name actors, were they hoping I mean, I know some movies do this sometimes, where you put all your budget into a supporting actor to then get more funding. You know, because so basically, once you can cast a star, known star, even in like a one scene role, it automatically adds value to the film. So if you're desperate for funding, you find some dude to come in who everyone knows, and then you can sell the movie for a lot more money or recruit other actors. You're
makes sense.
Hey, but I mean, Jeremy Irons and Marlon Wayans and I mean,
in 2000,
it's not like they were like giant movie stars then.
Yeah.
Marlon Wayans was at the height of his career in 2000.
Was Scary Movie during that time? Was that after? Or
I think it was technically after, but it was the same
like
time
right
frame.
around there.
Yeah, same time frame. Yeah. Okay, so I'm not going to one up you, Laron, but I will say, guys, I've never seen the actual Dungeons and Dragons as it was intended to be seen. I saw it on the Sci-Fi Channel.
Oh yeah.
Edited for TV. Probably, I don't know when, somewhere between 2003 and 2005.
Okay.
So I have never. That really doesn't count.
I don't think it's going to change.
No, I don't know that there's much editing going on there. The CG in that film is so bad too. It's so bad.
I watched it at a Flicks Brew House and they had a pre-show and they were playing a bunch of clips from that Earth movie, and man, it was a hoot watching the old movie.
Yeah.
So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, the first theatrically released Dungeons and Dragons movie was 2000, and as you can see, you can hear, it had quite some staying power in our memories. And last note I'm just going to make for listeners, because I do think there's probably some people listening to this show who are like, I've heard of Dungeons and Dragons. I think I understand kind of what it is. Well, just so you know, Dungeons and Dragons is a tabletop role-playing game and has existed in one form or another since at least the 1970s. Honestly, it almost certainly predates that, but I think that's when they actually put like TM on the idea of Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, so the original Dungeons and Dragons isn't an actual collectible game because it came out in leaflets as part of what's called Greyhawk, which was a totally different game. And this was Gary Gygax's like way to do a fantasy version of war games, because war games had been kind of popular. Think like when I say that, like Axis and Allies and Risks type things, but on like a table, right? They liked that idea, but everything was kind of the modern lens, and they wanted to do a fantasy lens. And so this Greyhawk book came out, and then they had these ways of doing it without the miniatures, and that was Dungeons and Dragons. But it was like a leaflet that was in this other book, right? And then it came out in other books, the other leaflets as compendiums. So it wasn't until it got its own first edition run that it is what we think of today as like a book game, right? Before that, it was just a loose set of rules in another game.
Well, and I remember what's funny, the thing even early on, because I didn't start playing Dungeons and Dragons. I guess I dabbled in it in high school a little bit, but it wasn't until college. I had some friends, my college friends, who were really into it, and I started playing a lot more. But I did notice very popular amongst like Marines and people in the military, so that makes sense. That, like, given the origins, it makes sense why it would be very popular in those groups. Yeah,
for sure, because they were tapping those people because they were the ones playing the modern versions of this war games, right? And so that was the community that birthed Dungeons and Dragons. So it totally makes sense that those were the types that were playing it back then. Yeah,
man. Gosh, guys. Okay, Laron, let me just turn to you here. I mean, clearly Caleb and I have played it. I'm going to dive a little more into your history here, Caleb. But Laron, what is your relationship with Dungeons and Dragons?
I knew of its existence and its popularity, but I never played it. I watched, like, again, the previous adaptation of the film. But in terms of the actual, like the game of it, I knew of how enthusiastic people were about it, but I was never converted to it, and it's not because it's just not my thing, but just for whatever reason, you never got involved with it. But that to me made watching this film very exciting, because then I'm going into it a little bit blind, and I do know generally that it's kind of I don't want to say pick your own adventure sort of thing, but basically there's not really the concept is that each decision makes a different, it has a different outcome, so, and I think that is translated very well in the film, that kind of spontaneity, don't know where we're going. You have a certain set of skills. You're not really great at it, but somehow it always works out for you. And I thought that was played really nicely.
So certainly like a randomness that you see in
the
film.
randomness is definitely is executed very well in the film, because they're like a band of misfits that don't. Some are really good at what they do, and then some are like, I can do this thing, but not good.
Yeah. Oh man. So Caleb, give us the rundown. What is your experience with Dungeons and Dragons?
So I remember hearing about it real young and being interested in it, but then just as that time happens, Satanic Panic happens.
Yep.
And it scares me away. I don't play this game because I hear if your character dies in game, you're going to be so attached, you're going to commit suicide. I heard that and I was like, that's going to happen to me. That's going to be me.
So for the listeners who maybe are uninitiated, some of them which who are probably perhaps even younger, Satanic Panic. Give us a very short blurb on it. So this is, of course,
I'll try. It's kind of a mouthful here, though. So the Satanic Panic happens when a couple deaths that happened around the country try to get linked to Dungeons and Dragons from kind of the Christian right for some reason. And in both of these two cases, one in Texas and one in Michigan, I think, they are very much not related, right? The one in Michigan, it's a sad case about a guy who's in college, who's struggling probably with a mental disorder that's undiagnosed and is just really struggling, not having a good time, commits suicide. And they find out later that he played Dungeons and Dragons with some friends down in what they call the steam tunnels. And so this sounds so mysterious, right? It ends up not being very mysterious. The steam tunnels ended up just being a place underground in campus where a lot of the boilers were. It wasn't like this cave that I remember hearing about this, and the way that people talked about it was they played in these caves and these tunnels, and no, it was just the boiler room. And that was sad. But it has nothing really even though he played it, had nothing. His death had nothing to do with that. It really was likely an undiagnosed mental disorder. The one in Texas, it's even crazier because it has to do with drugs and people really kind of getting mixed up in crowds that they shouldn't have been in. And for some reason, out of all of this, it's not the drugs or the weapons or any of that. It's Dungeons and Dragons that killed these kids. And it has nothing to do with it. They might have played, but it definitely wasn't a big part of these people's social status or what they did. It was just this thing that they might have done once or twice,
It's reminiscent. So I'm a few years younger than you. So I would say the thing that comes to mind when you describe it that way for me would be how, not trying to paint a certain group of people a certain way, but let's just say a certain Christian right tried really hard to say that Columbine was caused by doom and punk rock music, things like that.
Yeah, that was looking like it was going to go down this same path, right? Where we were going to start scapegoating doom and video games for other woes in children's lives, right? But it really happened with Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
And Dungeons and Dragons didn't take it seriously. The video game industry took it seriously, and they went to the Senate and hey, let's self-govern, let's figure this out. We don't want to end up like that. But D&D was kind of mocking these people.
Sounds appropriate, on brand.
It is appropriate and on brand, but it didn't do them any justice because there was a following and a backing to this movement, and they weren't taking it seriously. They weren't being litigious. They really should have been going after these news organizations that were getting facts wrong. But instead, they were that's so funny. And they thought free publicity. And for a while, that was the case. But eventually, boom, over a course of 15 years, they really ended up just going to like bottom barrel sales, just barely keeping alive. As a matter of fact, the creator didn't get to keep it. He had to sell to, keep solvent himself. And he ends up selling, there was two creators. One ends up selling to Gary Gygax, and then Gary Gygax eventually ends up selling it to Wizards of the Coast, who at the time, their only product was Magic the Gathering, but Magic the Gathering was doing very well.
And then they have like a little empire on this sort of like cold, kind of like niche.
Well, now Hasbro owns Wizards of the Coast, and it's kind of tough to tell like where the corporate lines start and where the nerddom starts, but there is definitely pressure on this Wizards of the Coast now to profit over making the games that they loved in the past.
I'm really glad you called out the Satanic Panic. I wasn't even thinking about that when I put this question here, but it had really long running impacts. I remember when I started playing in the early 2000s, I was in high school. I had a friend invite me over, and I was like, I can't tell my parents that I'm playing this. I think they probably would have been okay with it, but I didn't know.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I don't want them to like tell me I can't play this, right? But it was still, because of all the coverage and media they'd gotten,
right,
still really shaped how I think a lot of people thought about Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah,
like you must be dabbling with like devil worship or something if you play this game, or witchcraft of some sort. There was a point where this was a very controversial thing to do.
Right.
So the fact that it's been able to make its way to the mainstream big screen a couple times is pretty impressive. Ladies and gentlemen, what did we think of Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves? Caleb Haldane, our special guest for this week. What did you think?
I really enjoyed it. I think they finally figured out a formula that they could reproduce. Before, there was like this idea that the movie had to be always nodding to the game. And the nods had to be like the dice and the character classes and things like that. And I think it was much smarter for them to pivot completely. And the source material wasn't D&D for this. It was a group of books based off of D&D called Forgotten Realms. So Forgotten Realms is a series of books that are written about Faerun, maybe even more than Faerun, but Faerun is where this took place. When we were watching them in Neverwinter or in Baldur's Gate or on the Sword Coast, that's all part of Faerun. Faerun's a continent on this one planet where all the Forgotten Realms books take place. Even when they're up in Icewind Dale for the prison, that's part of this Forgotten Realms. And I thought that was a really great idea to pivot away from like thinking about the game and the dice and the classes, like make the classes like obvious without ever anybody saying rogue. Like don't say it. You say it and you break the illusion that this is the world they live in.
You're a rogue one,
right?
Aren't you?
Yeah,
they don't do that.
They don't do that, but they did that in the 2000s. Yeah. So it's just like they finally kind of understood how to tell a story, and it's really let's lean in on the books and less on the game. And I think that they did that, and I think overall it really showed that they care for the content that they were writing about.
Did you like it? Maybe number one question.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought that they really wrote some media for me, a player of this game. Yeah.
Laron, Chapman, what did you think of Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves?
It's so fascinating to hear all of that, knowing none of that. And I also really enjoyed this.
Yeah.
Like I really enjoyed this. I was really pleasantly surprised how quickly I got sucked into it. Because I'll be honest, like when the trailers came out, Caleb, you mentioned how turned on you were just by how everything was, really nicely packaged in the trailer. And for me, I just said that's going to be another mediocre fantasy adventure movie that's going to come very quickly and disappear very quickly. I was like, there's a couple of cast members in it that I was like, it's something I would wait to see, essentially. But then seeing the kind of the glowing reception for it by audiences and critics, really kind of like, piqued my interest a little bit. And so going into it, I went into it kind of thinking that, okay, I know this is generally well liked, but am I the audience for it? And what's exciting about this is that the audience for this is very broad. You know what I mean? Like it can appeal to the fans of the game, can appeal to people who are, familiar with everything. And it also just is just a good time, like the cast is really strong here. Chris Pine is allowed to be comedic, which I think he's best at.
Yes. Charming.
He's one of the best Chris's, I think.
Whoa. Not one of. Not one of LeBron. He is the best Chris. Come on.
Okay,
Yeah, he does comedy really well. He does charming. He can do suave.
In different circles, people will eat me up about that.
Hell or high water. I mean, I put no other Chris has a performance as good or hell or high water. None.
Yeah. Well,
Fight me.
Right.
Okay. Anyway, continue.
No, you're good. And then I think the chemistry between him and Michelle Rodriguez. I think she's a very underrated actress. She will play in any genre movie and she will ground it. She's in the Fast and the Furious, which is ridiculous.
Oh yeah.
And I love it because she's
basically a fantasy.
It's basically a fantasy stuff at this point. Yeah, exactly. She's an Avatar. She's been in all these different things, and she's always, when she's on screen, it doesn't matter what wacky shit's going on around her, you believe her. So I really liked the rapport with her. I love the cast of characters in this. And the comedy works. Like, it just lands. It's not so. It's not so like, the in crowd, the in the know of, it's not so for the uninitiated.
You don't have to understand the references to laugh at the jokes.
Absolutely. Yeah. It is just funny as funny,
Though there are a lot of jokes that I think you can appreciate more if you know, but
Absolutely.
Also it's not like all the jokes don't rely on knowing stuff.
Yeah. There's a lot of farcical, satirical things in this that just kind of work. And I was surprised by even the action set pieces. Like, normally action in these fantasy movies kind of feel kind of vanilla or kind of all hodgepodge together, And I actually think the individual set pieces in this actually work. They actually thrill, the different big moments, that they have in it. So I enjoyed it just as a film on its own, So knowing very little to nothing about it, enjoyed it in its own right. So.
Awesome. So we've got two people who are thumbs up on this. I'm going to agree. I think this is a great movie. I had a fun time watching this movie. It felt like despite I know we're not talking about the 2000 movie, but this felt like a throwback to me. And I think it's because it felt like a throwback to the old action adventure comedies. Think like The Mummy, for example. There was a lot of things in the 90s. You get these action comedy bits, The Mummy, or maybe like Rush Hour. Like, there's all these different action comedies. This one just happens to be set in a fantasy world where it relies a lot on the charm of the cast. The action set pieces are there. They're impressive visually as a spectacle piece, but oftentimes they're actually a punchline. There's a punchline at the end of them.
There's an element of humor for sure.
And it's one of those things where maybe, Laron, you and I feel like people who like superhero movies are probably tired of hearing us complain about it, but I think we've gotten so used to being served a certain kind of mainstream blockbuster for so long. This just feels refreshing, even though I feel like it's relying on a lot of things that had been done probably 20 or so years ago in blockbusters like this.
Yeah.
But I had a really good time. Like you said, I love the cast. Chris Pine's great. Michelle Rodriguez, Justice Smith, Hugh Grant. Man, I am loving this late stage Hugh Grant where he's leaning into being this smarmy douchebag in every movie he's in.
He used to be the charming guy in every movie, and now he's like playing the curmudgeon and everything.
But like he's still got the suave.
Sure,
always.
Sure.
He's using it for evil means versus the kind of like good old boy type of thing. I love to see it. I won't spoil it. There's a couple cameos in here that I thought were a lot of fun that I was not expecting, and overall, I would say the visual effects were more impressive than they weren't. There were a few times when I saw it a little more than I wanted, but in general, I thought the visual effects, especially for a movie budgeted at $150, which is expensive, but it's not $250 like a Marvel movie, for example, it looks a lot better than most Marvel movies.
It's ambitious too.
It is.
Like it is not spending that 150 cheaply, or frivolously, I should say. It really surprised me with how ambitious they really went for this movie. There's lots of scenes that are likely 100% CG.
Oh yeah.
And they live in this moments for quite a while,
Yes, there are some that are definitely 100% CG, but also there's a lot of this stuff that at least it looks like they went to a real place and shot a movie with, and they added visual effects later. Yeah. Whereas again, I know like coming off of Ant-Man, it's like, wow, they literally, or a lot of the Star Wars stuff we've seen lately, it's literally just, we're in the volume. We're in front of these giant LED screens. And even though it's better than green screen, you can still super tell that's what you're doing. And it makes it look cheap versus this where I really believe they were in this fantasy world. Like it was so good that I was like swooped in and immersed in it.
The production value is strong, and also there's and they pair the strong production value with also like anytime there's CGI that's cartoony in any type of way, there's kind of a very specific intent for it. Right. You know, it's like I mean, we'll talk about it later, but like a dragon and certain things like that come out and like there's a pun here or a joke here or something. There's a very specific reason why this thing looks the way that it does. You know what I mean? Like so, and maybe because of the realm that we're in, we're more forgiving too of those things because it feels like it's part of this universe that they've established.
Caleb, I want to turn it to you here. You and I have both, as we've articulated, already played the games.
Yeah.
How well do you think this movie articulated and captured the essence from a Dungeons and Dragons campaign?
Yeah, like a lot of the tropes are hit. There's and they make a tongue-in-cheek joke out of a lot of them too. One that stands out the most to me is like magic can't solve everything. You know, like it's a weird thing when you need to put a rule system on magic because magic is so intangible. Why can't it do everything? Well, so the book goes very detailed in what it can and cannot do, but then it's just got this weird in-universe, like can do everything but not everything, you know? Mm-hmm. And they tackle that, even that specific joke. And then they also, in tongue-in-cheek, the very next thing can be solved with magic. Mm. It is a funny, like, that discussion happens at almost every table. And it's funny to put it in the movie as a discussion, you know? Mm-hmm. Like, it wasn't even just, like, something to be witnessed or you know, seen. They actually have it as a discussion, which is funny.
It's funny because it reminds me a lot of those talks. Again, so listeners who have not played the game Dungeons and Dragons, there's one person who is the dungeon master. They've likely written the story for this campaign, and they're the ones who set up all the fights and are kind of the sort of narrator guiding you along. However, the players can do things that the DM does not expect, and thus randomness ensues. And sometimes the game goes in a wildly different direction than the dungeon master is anticipating, and thus they have to rewrite their story, right? Yeah. So I felt like that was one of those, like, I in college, I did this all the time. You'd always have that one friend who's like trying so hard to push the rules as far as they can go or find a loophole. Yeah. And I felt like it did that a couple times in the movie. They're like, well, we can't do that, but you could do this. Yeah. Can we do this? I don't know. Let's try it, you know?
Yeah. I agree. I think those things are definitely nods to that exact type of discussion that ends up happening at the tables, you know? And so when those things happen and there's all these plans within plans within plans, and some of how like they work out in tandem, it felt very much like a good DM making their plans mesh together.
I don't want to spoil it, but there is definitely a joke in the movie where you spend a lot of time for them doing something only for them to later discover, oh, we didn't even need to do that thing. And you're like, we did it. In any other movie, I'd be like, I can't believe they did that. Yeah. But because this is a Dungeons and Dragons movie,
it fits.
It totally works. Yeah. And for the uninitiated, it's a punchline to a joke. You're like, wait, we did all this for what? Nothing?
It plays into the tongue-in-cheekness of it. Right. Sure.
And it is also, like, I just think a key part of what makes Dungeons and Dragons super fun.
Yeah.
So for me, the two key things, in my recollection, I actually haven't played Dungeons and Dragons proper in quite a while. Need to remedy that probably. But the two things that always stuck out to me are the camaraderie, which I actually think this cast has a really great chemistry and you really believe that they're all leaning on each other. They're the unlikely band of misfits sort of thing, which I know is a trope, but the actors do a really great job selling it in the relationships they have. Another thing is just the randomness of all of it. A lot of the best jokes I think come from, you're like, oh, something weird happens. It's like, oh, that person, they didn't roll very well, did they? You know, like they got a bad roll and this awful thing happened for no reason, you know, or they rolled really good and it's like, there's no way they should have been able to do that, but they had a nat 20, you know, or a natural 20 is what they call. And if you're playing the game, that you ask, I'm going to do this thing and you get the best outcome for that type of thing. So I thought this movie captured both of those things really well.
I thought also that in Dungeons and Dragons, it's very common to have this disparate party where you've got different classes, different races, and they're coming together. And they made that party feel very organic. It didn't feel very Like if it didn't feel super forced and just weird. And so I thought that they probably behind the scenes spent a lot of time thinking like, how do we make that part feel natural? Because I thought they really kind of worked for me.
Yeah.
It's so great to see, because you would think on paper, it's like there's no way you can adapt the feeling of Dungeons and Dragons. Like
Right.
how do you even adapt a feeling? Because
Yeah.
everyone has different feelings and associations and memories with the games. But I thought, at least for my money, with the things I've always enjoyed the most, they adapted very well. And it sounds like Caleb's the same for you as well.
Well, and the camaraderie is important, and that's something you mentioned. You know, that's what comes across through and through, and I think that's really the heart and soul of the entire affair. You know, why people commune and do these things together. You know, and so
listeners, for context, sometimes campaigns and storylines can go on for years. It's all about how long you decide to make it. So like it really is. You set an appointment for 3 or 4 hours on this night of the week, or however many times we're all meeting to do this thing, playing these characters, you know, and so you really are spending a lot of time with your friends, your people who are also playing in the game.
Yeah, encapsulates that feeling very well.
Laron, I mean, having not played the game, did you pick up on a lot of this when you were watching the movie?
I don't, you know, I mean, the thing is, like, I get the appeal of like of getting together with your friends and going on an adventure, and the rules, like you said, kind of sometimes contradicting each other, but the point is you're having a good time and it's challenging and you're going on a journey together. And so I think it encapsulated that really well. Again, I love the satirical kind of tongue-in-cheekness of it all, because it immediately like makes me not take it too seriously, and the film itself doesn't take itself too seriously. There are certainly some character stakes involved here, but each character feels distinct and dynamic enough, and you know what all of them bring to the table. You know what all of them, you know, what they contribute to the core group, and so it's just a fun to be around these people for a while, and it kind of reminds you of what it's like to be around your friends, you know, like, and they all bring something different to the table. Some of them are a little too chatty, some of them are a little too whatever, you know what I mean? Like, and so, you know, but they all have something that you value in each one of them, you know, and so I feel like these people represent, you know, that camaraderie and that friendship that you have, you know, doing something that's just fun, you know, and so that built into this fantasy universe just kind of really, it just works. It works on a very broad scale. That's what surprises me, because I truly believed after seeing this that I wouldn't enjoy it because it would be too much for the initiated. You know, that it would definitely appeal to people who play the game, but that people who didn't probably wouldn't get anything from it. But that just, I couldn't be more wrong about that. So
yeah, I think that's well said. I can't wait to rewatch this movie.
Yeah,
like that's great, because I don't really rewatch movies very often unless they're called John Wick Chapter 4 apparently. But you know, like it's one of those, like I've been telling everyone to go see this movie.
Yeah.
Well, before we move on, just really quickly, and we can't spoil it, so this is sort of, you know, we got to walk a fine line here. But do we have a favorite gag we want to maybe allude to from the movie?
Come back to me.
Laron.
The reveal of a particular dragon is fun, because it's one of those things, one of those tropes, those things that just has to be in this story, you know, because of the nature of it and what it is. And it's just not what you think it would be. And I can understand that maybe that's for me, because I understand from some people that it is in the game. That is a thing. I didn't know that. So as for me being uninitiated and seeing that was just hilarious, you know, like, so, and that scene still has, like, you know, thrilling, like, action stakes or what have you, but there's a lot of charm and humor to it and silliness to it too. So
yeah,
I loved the reveal of the dragon.
Mm-hmm. So that's a good pick. Caleb?
For me, it's the wild magic, the use of wild magic, actually. It's a really weird mechanic in the game, and it's a weirder thing to try to explain. And yet I thought they did it pretty well with the sorcerer. He is clearly a wild magic sorcerer. And that is like, it makes things very unpredictable in your game, right? Because you try to do one thing and then something else ends up happening. And yet they really kind of nailed that, I thought.
Yeah. No, I thought so too. And that's a long running gag too.
Yeah, it's not
just
a
like
short
one
gag. That's why I had you go on, because like, is there a spoiler here? And I'm like, I think I can word this in a way that's not spoilery.
So I'm going to pick two. The first one, I'm just going to say, You get to see what happens when you fail at rolling a projection. I laughed quite a bit. Bring out your dead.
Yeah.
Bring out your dead.
There you go.
They really milked it, but also it worked really. I hook, line, sinker for me.
Yeah.
What letter grade would you give Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves? Talk about randomness. Laron Chapman.
I'm going to go with an A- on this as well. Like it just was really enjoyable. And, and I always judge that based on like, when I rewatch this, like, I feel like anytime this was on, I'd watch it. And I immediately thought I would like to see these characters again, 2 or 3 more times in a franchise of this. So if I can say that about a first entry to, something that, again, I didn't play or wasn't involved with, then that says something really strongly about how they've encapsulated this. Like, a lot of people put a lot of affection and care into this, and were able to encapsulate a feeling more than the specificity of how to do this particular game. You know what I mean? So, and maybe that's there as well, but it has a very broad appeal. So I'll go with A-.
Caleb Haldane, what letter grade would you give Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves?
I really like it. So a B+ for me it's not dissing it. I still think that's a really like great grade. I'm happy with the movie at that. I was expecting way less. I honestly saw the trailers and didn't expect a whole lot. I kind of felt like, okay, these when you had said this is going to be another fantasy movie that comes and goes, I felt exactly that way. And so what the trailers did not make me feel any different. So when I saw this and I feel the B+, that's a really great grade, I think. So, yeah.
And we didn't have any examples leading up to it, because you said there have been different stabs at this, throughout time, and none of them were successful. So we had no reason, we had nothing to go off of as being successful to think that this would be the change of that. So.
Well, and I think when you bring that up, it made me think in my Letterboxd review for this, I said, if you're comparing this to other fantasy, you have Lord of the Rings, which is like classical music.
Yeah.
And you've got Game of Thrones, it's sort of like punk rock. This is like jazz with a whole lot of silliness in it. You know what I mean? Like it's yes, it's fantasy, but it's such a radically different thing than what people are used to seeing on fantasy in the big screen.
For sure.
And I think that's a huge feature, not a bug. And it's why I'm also going to give it a B+. Again, I think the B+ is really good. This is a 4. I gave it 4 stars on Letterboxd. I might even, on repeat watching, don't want to get my hopes up, might even go up to a 4.5, because I just think it's super rewatchable. I love the cast. Laron, like you said, I would watch at least 2 more of these.
2 more of these.
Yeah.
And
assuming they're of the same caliber.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, I would love to see more of these characters, more of this world. And again, if they can just do more of this and like lean into it even more, I'm all there for it. And I really, really had a great time. Like I said, if I can find time for it, I will absolutely catch it again, but we'll certainly be rewatching it once it hits home video.
I will say I totally failed my con save at the end of the movie.
I will say one thing is there was a point, how do I talk about this without spoiling it? There was a point in the movie where I thought, oh, this is the end of the movie. A bunch of your characters are in one place doing a thing. And you're like, I was like, oh, this is the joke. They're just going to leave things in a mess.
Yeah.
But it would have been kind of hilarious had they done that. Well, what other movies, television shows, novels, music, video games, what else would you recommend to listeners who enjoy Dungeons & Dragons, Honor Among Thieves? Laron Chapman.
This reminded me a lot of The Princess Bride. That came to mind, that tonality at least, the kind of, again, the tongue-in-cheekness, it's genuinely a fantasy film, but there's also this element of satire that just kind of makes it its own thing, it adds a different sheen to it, so I'd say that, and then I get a little Monty Python vibes too, so I would say, rewatch the classic, Princess Bride, and then one of the Monty Pythons. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Holy Grail.
Caleb Haldane.
Yeah, I love those, and I'm going to go completely different direction than you. And I'm going to say Snatch. I actually
great movie.
think that
Guy
this
Ritchie.
reads like a heist movie.
Yes, it does.
It reads like an ensemble movie. And so I feel like, maybe a more adult telling of that would be Snatch. Like they're both in on the comedy, they're both in on the heist and the ensembleness of it, but done in very different ways. Obviously, one is not fantasy at all, but I would like to see that style of storytelling done in a D&D movie where you're always cutting to different party members and like catching their perspective instead of always having the singular perspective of Chris Pine in this case, you know?
Sure.
I think that could be a lot of fun. And that would also kind of hint at the sort of aspect of the game, which is always fun in Dungeons and Dragons, because there's the air quotes in game when your character, you know things as the player, your characters don't, but you have to play the character as if they don't know things. So sometimes like you're like that would play the in-character thing where it's like, oh, these characters only saw this thing.
Right.
Meanwhile, these other characters saw these things. But then as the audience, we
get
see
all the
everything.
knowledge, right.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Okay. That's a
Very
great
clever aesthetically. Yeah. If they could pull that off.
Yeah. So it's
multi-perspective.
It's a bit of a tangent, but I think it tracks.
I'm just going to say, if we're talking about Michelle Rodriguez in an ensemble heist movie, not that it needs any recommending, but I mean, Fast and Furious guy. I mean, more specifically, she's technically not in Fast 5, the best entry of the series. So I guess I can't recommend that. So you go with 6, in which she is in, even though 5 is a superior movie. But those are, there's a lot of overlap. That one being
5 through
movies.
9, skip 8. That's how I feel.
Yes, always.
5 through 9,
skip 8. Skip 8. It doesn't exist.
Yes. There's 1. There's 5 through 9, skip 8. It's like
you watch the baby and the airplane sequence on YouTube from 8. That's all you need, though.
That's true.
That's all you need. I'm also going to say, I've already mentioned some of the other adventure movies in my review, The Mummy, Rush Hour, Stardust, a very underrated from director Matthew Vaughn. That's a fantasy. It's not, there is an ensemble, but I wouldn't say that the camaraderie is not quite there. There's very clearly a main character that it's their kind of hero's journey, but you do have a really strong supporting cast in that, including Robert De Niro, who plays a cross-dressing pirate, which is always a lot of fun. Almost no one's seen that movie. So any chance I can say, go watch Stardust. It's just a sweet, fun, whimsical fantasy.
And anyone I know who has seen it loves it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's definitely an underrated fantasy gem for sure.
And if you want to go all the way back to the nostalgia, things that when I think of fantasy from the era of that 2000 movie, I think of technically from the 90s, The Page Master, the animated movie that was there to sell literacy. Yeah, that's right. I don't know if that movie's any good. I haven't watched it in at least 20 years, but you know what?
I watched it during the pandemic, and for me, it still holds up.
Nice.
It's too short, though. I will say that. It's like 73 minutes.
Oh, gosh, really?
So you'd be surprised. It's like an hour and 13 minutes. So like it's really not a long movie, but it's still maybe it was nostalgia, but I still got a kick from it rewatching it.
I loved that movie growing up. I checked it out from the library all the time. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Well, there you have it. Those are our reviews of Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. We all say go check it out as soon as you can. Let's move on to the second film we're reviewing today, the Super Mario Brothers movie. Not to be confused with the Mario Brothers movie.
All right. Let's go.
Oh my God. Okay.
Not sure if you know who I am, but I'm about to rule the world.
Wow, yay.
But there's one problem. There's a human, has a mustache, just like you.
You think I know every human being with a mustache wearing an identical outfit with a hat with the letter of his first name on it? Because I don't.
Bowser is coming. Together, we are going to stop that monster.
How? Look at us. We're adorable.
According to IMDb, the Super Mario Brothers movie is described as the story of the Super Mario Brothers on their journey through Mushroom Kingdom. That is pretty accurate, actually.
Okay.
I would say that's pretty accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so a few fun facts about Mario at large, but also related to this movie. Super Mario as a character was actually introduced as Jumpman over 40 years ago in 1981's Donkey Kong arcade machine. The character was then later popularized as the character known as Mario in 1985's Super Mario Brothers, and that was the game that everyone probably remembers as being packed in with the Nintendo Entertainment System.
You missed the Mario Brothers. Was a game in between.
Oh, is it
Donkey Kong?
Yeah, that was another arcade machine, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so it's the second and you've probably played this one. It's like where you have Mario and Luigi running, like there's
like crabs that come out of tubes.
Yeah,
and Koopas, and you got to hit them from underneath and then kick them for a coin.
I did forget that is where that is where the Mario Brothers.
That's where
came from.
That's exactly That's where Luigi comes from, and that's where Jumpman changes into Mario. Did you notice Jumpman is in?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Can't miss him, right? Like, great call out. Thank you for that correction. This is why I've got you here. This is also the second time Mario has made an appearance on the big screen, the first time being 1993's Super Mario Brothers. Notably considered one of the worst films ever made, certainly one of the worst video game adaptations ever made. And unlike the first film from 1993, this adaptation was co-produced by Nintendo with the character's creator, Shigeru Miyamoto, and he was directly involved as a producer. It is literally, the movie opens with a Shigeru Miyamoto production. He also served as one of the film's main creative influences. Now, I'm going to pause here and just say, I'm a huge fan of Mario and Nintendo. I mean, you guys both know this. Any of you guys have been to my house, I literally have a Master Sword hanging on my wall that I'm looking at right now. I've got a ton of these little figures called amiibos. They're all Nintendo themed in my office. I love Nintendo stuff. I want to reiterate that I think Shigeru Miyamoto might be one of the most brilliant creatives alive right now. I mean, Mario, Zelda, he's popularized so many different video games, Pikmin. I mean, this guy has literally just like ideas falling out his ears.
Yeah.
Not only that, he's been able to scale the success from 2D to 3D. So I'm talking about going from the Nintendo, Super Nintendo, where it was all 8-bit, 2D animation, to 3D animation, where you get Super Mario 64, Ocarina of Time, which are fundamentally different types of games.
Yeah.
He had his hand in that. And most recently, they have opened the Super Nintendo theme park in Japan and actually very recently here in the US and California. So I have a lot of reverence to this specific individual, like as much reverence as I would have on the movie side to Steven Spielberg. Like that, he's of that, in my mind, he's of that level for video games, right? Yeah. The film was also made by the studio Illumination. For those of you who maybe don't recognize the name, this is the studio behind Despicable Me, The Secret Life of Pets, and Sing franchises. As of this recording, the Super Mario Brothers movie holds a 54% on Rotten Tomatoes from critics and 96% from fans, with over 2,500 verified votes. With that said, Caleb Haldane, I'll start with you. What is your relationship with the video game franchise?
As a kid, I grew up on these. I was playing the arcade Mario Brothers game before I had an NES. And then when I got an NES, of course, my first game was Super Mario Brothers. I loved Super Mario 2, Super Mario 3. Like, these are classics, I don't know that I've kept up with it. So the modern games, like I haven't played Odyssey, haven't played Galaxy or Sunshine. So those are the ones I have not played. I think I've played everything else in the major canon of Super Mario.
Okay, so tons of familiarity with the classics, less so with the more recent, say, 20 years.
Yeah.
Laron, Chapman, how about you? What is your relationship with the video game franchise?
I played it on Nintendo as a kid, for sure. I vividly remember playing Super Mario Kart, with cousins, and I think I've sacrificed a couple of years of my life to just doing that, because it was just so addictive, There's, for me, like in those games, in at least the ones I played, there's not much of a story. It's very interactive. It's just in a way it's challenging in a way that say Tetris is, and you just kind of put something together. There's a very very clear objective. Just do this one thing.
Yeah, you get all the way to the right side of the screen.
Exactly, and just perfect to that one thing, and and then for whatever reason you can do that for for a long time. So that's, I would say, Generally, my understanding of it. I understand their general characteristics, but yeah, that's kind of been my experience with Mario.
Okay, so I think all of us have experience, especially with the classics. For myself, I will say I've already expressed to you that I love Nintendo. One of my earliest core memories of my life is playing Super Mario Brothers 3. I'm pretty confident it's the first game I ever beat, and when you're like, I think I was probably like 6 when I beat it, and it felt like I had just like climbed Mount Everest, you know. And I have kept up with all the games. I've played all the mainline games from the NES with Super Mario 1, 2, 3, Super Mario World. Even played like the Yoshi's Island games, which are technically Super Mario World 2, I think. Super Mario 64. On the GameCube, it was Super Mario Sunshine. On the Wii, it was Mario Galaxy 1 and 2. On the Wii U, it was Super Mario 3D World, which was also later ported to the Switch. And then most recently, Super Mario Odyssey. And
New Super Mario was in there too.
And that's the other thing. Then there's the sub-series, which is so in the DS, GameCube / Wii era, somewhere in there, they created a separate track of games. There's the kind of new games that are always sort of showcasing the technology of the new console. They're more focused on the 3D exploration, kind of interacting in a 3D space. Well, they said, hey, what if we did the air quotes new Super Mario Brothers, where they then they kind of like adapted the old classic style, where, run from the left side to the right side with more modern 3D graphics. And there's been several of those.
That's where the Catsuit comes from, right?
Catsuit is Super Mario 3D World, which is the Wii U game, which is kind of a weird hybrid.
It's also in New Super Mario Brothers, so I didn't know.
It's not New Super Mario Brothers. See, it gets confusing. It's Super Mario 3D World that they
but I call New Super Mario's the other canon side scroller. Isn't the Catsuit in that one too?
No, well, the Catsuit might appear in one of those, but its first appearance was Super Mario 3D World on the Wii U, which is kind of like you closer to Galaxy, where you interact. You have like little levels you would play and you interact in a 3D space. That said, I bet the cat has probably appeared in one of the new air quotes. It's very confusing. Nintendo is very bad at branding, by the way.
Especially this.
That is what I'm gathering.
Yeah. There's the Wii and the Wii U, and they literally had to send out a message to every. Anyway, so I love me some Super Mario Brothers. I still love me some Super Mario Brothers. Listeners can't see I've got a Super Mario Odyssey cap I got when I went to E3 2017 because they were demoing the game
cross
there.
eyes on it.
Yes, it's an amazing game. All that said, what did we think of the Super Mario Brothers movie? Laron Chapman, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm unfortunately very mid on this one. I think all the things that worked really, really, really well for D&D, are kind of lacking on this IP. It feels like this is definitely a nostalgic trip that works as both a pro and a con, to the success of this being broadly appealing to people. So I don't think that, for me, having some semblance of remembering what it was like to play this game and who these characters were, in the world that they've created, that definitely appealed to me. There's some nostalgic appeal for me, but that is the only thing that kept me, invested in this. And so I think that if I was recommending this to somebody else who, say, didn't play the game, I don't know that they would have the same affection for it, that hardcore gamers that love this game would. So I think this is definitely one for the fans and not just for general audience, if that makes sense.
So unlike D&D, which we think did a really great job of making it accessible to new people, this is very
insular in terms of yes, if you don't get these references, then you're not going to get why they're freaking out about this mushroom or this thing, so for sure it's definitely you had to play the game for these things to appeal to you in that way.
All right, so Laron's mid. Caleb Haldane, what do you think of this movie?
I'm also mid, yeah. I will say this, though. If this was the movie I got as a kid for Super Mario Brothers, it would have blown my mind, and it would have been the best movie I thought ever until Jurassic Park. There would have been no movie to knock this movie off of its pedestal. That being said, I'm a little bit removed from that now, and it's not still that IP that is just draws me in the same way. And because of that, yeah, I feel very, very similar. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, so I find myself at kind of a weird intersection on this. And here's the reason I mentioned those Rotten Tomato scores here earlier. I've been doing film criticism for over a decade, self-starter. So I'm not like, I didn't go to a film school to get education. I just read I just read a ton of reviews and a lot of books from film critics and have tried to sharpen my skills that way. But, so self-made film critic, sure, right? But I've been in the film critic space for a long time. I've also been a lifelong gamer and been very plugged in with games media. Like I still have a lot of YouTubers I follow who started as games journalists like 10 or 15 years ago. I'm really plugged into what that world is thinking about games. So I have a lot of film critics I go to for film opinions if I'm looking for like somewhere to like sharpen my thoughts or kind of bounce some ideas off of when I'm reading a review or listen to a podcast from someone. And then I have that same thing for the games people. And what's been really interesting for me is it's like night and day. The film people think this movie is very bad. The games people think this thing is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And there's not been a ton of middle ground. I'm not saying that's universal. I've heard some of the games people have said, well, I wish it was better.
Yeah.
But they haven't been like, this is trash. No one has said, of the people I follow in the game space, no one has been like, this is just outright trash.
Yeah.
Here's where I fall on it. As a fan, this movie put a big dumb grin on my face.
Sure.
As a movie, this is a bad movie. This is a lazy movie. And I want to be very clear that if this movie brings you joy and happiness and excitement, I do not in any way ever want to take that away from you. It brought me joy and excitement. I had fun. Yeah. There was that part of me that's still that kid who's always wanted a Mario Brothers movie.
And I love knowing that I was in on the thing that they're showing.
Right.
But that's...
But that's really where it stops, though.
Yeah,
There's barely a story here.
Yeah.
Mario, like almost none of these characters have any real characterization. Like they're all. What is Mario's arc in this movie? I'm dead serious. Like, what is Peach's arc in this movie? There's no. These characters don't have arcs, and here's the thing. They're the same way in the games, but the thing about Mario games is you don't play the games for Mario games specifically for story. They're literally there as an exercise. It's just like Nintendo plays with game mechanics. They innovate. They find new ways that the whole thing is we want to put a smile on your face through gameplay.
But they also set up an arc. They set up like he's a failed businessman.
Exactly.
They don't ever follow that arc up.
No, it's just introduced and then forgotten.
Well, no, it's not forgotten, but then they deliver a moment at the end where you're like, yeah.
But he's not a businessman now.
No.
He's just he's a hero, sure. But like that wasn't his arc. His arc was a failed businessman.
Right.
Yeah.
And they just abandoned that but now he's a hero. So that probably doesn't bother him anymore.
Corrects this. Right.
Right. His dad was disappointed with him. And now you don't really get a lot of closure on that either. So I'm just saying, if the things I'm looking for in movies, this movie has almost none of it. Like it doesn't have great character writing. It doesn't, and even the jokes outside of the references, and there are loads of them. There are references everywhere. References for old timers who've been around like you and I, all of us at this table. References for people who've only played a couple of the more recent games. Like it's everywhere. The score is loaded with lots of musical cues and motifs from various of the games over the last almost 4 decades. So like there's a lot there if you're a fan to be like, this feels right. But also if you strip all that stuff away, there's really not, this movie does not have much to offer, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So if you're okay with that, I say go and have a great time. I've been telling everyone's like, how was it? I was like, well, I had fun. It's kind of boring and not that interesting in terms of story, but I had fun. If you like the games or you have kids, I think you're right. I think this movie is going to be a huge hit with families.
Yeah.
I think you're going to be great.
I will say one thing that I haven't seen a lot of getting attention that I thought they did well was when I saw the cast listing, I was kind of rolled my eyes. I was just like, oh God. I'm just going to see and hear Chris Pratt. I'm just going to see and hear Jack Black. But honestly, when I was in the movie, I didn't do that. They must have modulated them or done something to them that they didn't come off just strictly, Chris Pratt and Jack Black, like Charlie Day, but Charlie Day, I don't know that there's much modulation that's going to take out Charlie
His
Day.
voice is too, what can you do?
It's just too much. Yeah.
Well, okay, so I said there was no characterization. The one character that does get, in my opinion, pretty strong characterization is Bowser.
Yeah.
And Jack Black is having so much fun. He gets a musical number in this movie.
Yeah.
He's great. He's the great. But yeah, I will say this. Yeah, that's a good point. I did not... for all the controversy on the internet about Chris Pratt being bad, they write in a joke at the beginning to explain why it's that way. I'll just say he's not supposed to be Italian. That's the whole thing.
Right.
And I think because of that, it worked enough that I kind of bought it, probably subconsciously, because I didn't think about it after that moment.
He's Italian American, right? And so
first generation, like his parents immigrated to America, and they live in Brooklyn.
And so he doesn't have an accent in the movie, but there is a part where they kind of give him the accent for a commercial, and that they get to have their cake and eat it too with this, right? Like there's a nod to it. This is what he sounds like in the game, so we have to do with it. But the reality is we're moving away from this accent because it's not okay.
It's super. I have my brother-in-law who has Italian roots. He says it's kind of cringy and definitely not acceptable in 2023.
Right.
Spaghetti and meatball.
So they get to do it. They get to do it, and they get to walk away from it, and they get to say, look, now we don't have to deal with it anymore.
And I think you're right though. Chris Pratt was not a distraction for me in any way. Once I don't know if it was. I don't remember consciously switching. But I just kind of forgot that it was him doing the voice, honestly.
Right. Yeah. I was really concerned it was going to be distracting.
Yes.
And it was not.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree. Laron, what was your take on the cast?
So I generally agree with you guys. I don't think he was, he definitely wasn't distracting. For me, he was fine. Right. I'll just put that a very, very like nondescript. You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't.
Well, yeah, that's why he cast Chris Pratt.
Yeah, it's just flat. It's just flat line. It's just like oatmeal, no sugar, no brown sugar, no butter. It's just like it just feels very like I think that generally, like I said, the people that stood out to me, if I'm thinking of a cast member that I thought, like again, Jack Black, I think is great in this. I think also, Seth Rogen as Donkey Kong. These were fun things for me.
Keegan-Michael Key.
Yeah,
great.
He was unrecognizable.
Yeah,
because when you think about it, all these people have pretty distinct. Like Seth Rogen has a distinct voice and a distinct laugh.
Well, what's funny about Seth Rogen was he said when they called him for the role, he's like, "Well, I'm not going to do a voice, so if I'm down if you guys are okay with Donkey Kong sounding like me, and
it kind of works. Yeah. It kind of works. Yeah. So like that was fine for me. The Chris Pratt thing, I had to go into it with some trepidation, and then left it feeling like. He didn't add anything. Right. He didn't take anything away.
Well, I mean, that's how, but you know what? That's the funny thing about that is it matches the characterization, which is there's not a lot there.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to trump it up, but like I was expecting awful.
Be terrible.
I was expecting and so when I was
serviceable.
Right. When I was expecting a bowl of crap and you gave me the bland oatmeal, I'm like, oh, this is great.
Bland oatmeal. I'm so happy.
I can eat this.
Right. I just felt like generally everyone did fine. It felt like it was everything about this was very safe. Now, there's a couple things I want to add about this. One is, despite Nintendo being a wildly innovative company with gameplay, when it comes to like brand standards, they are actually crazy conservative and protective of their properties. So I would be really interesting. Also, Nintendo's super secretive, so we're never going to find this out on the Blu-ray or DVD or whatever. I would really love to know the process for like just the beginning of the creative process, and like how are we going to give Mario an arc? And the secret is they didn't give him one,
right?
Because it preserves their ability to kind of Mickey Mouse Mario, which is what they're doing.
Yeah.
He's an icon. He represents fun and smiles, but there's not really anything there, like character wise, to latch onto. Other than there was the one thing where they're like, Luigi says, "My brother's the nicest guy," and I was like, "That's okay. That's about it."
Yeah.
So I don't know. So. Did you guys think this captured enough about the essence of the games to be considered a successful adaptation? Because I know, Laron, you said it.
Yeah.
I feel like it was missing. There was several kind of like air quotes. So for those of you who are not in the know on the gaming side, the Mario games are generally considered platformers. Platformers being games where you jump on top of, like a core part of the game is jumping on top of different things.
Yeah.
And there's a few sequences where they played into that, I thought.
It captures the essence, absolutely. And I think like that's there. The world building's there. Like the nods are there. Like that's the thing is like it does capture that. And you know, the truth is there just simply wasn't much there to begin with from a narrative arc standpoint. And the hope, at least if you're going to adapt a game to a cinematic format, that you would do the work to create that, take some creative licenses, what have you. And it seems like they just didn't know what to do with it. And so like, so let's get the aesthetic right. Let's get the vibe right. Let's get the, because these games are really much more like objective based than they are character based, know. So
you go rescue the princess. That's
exactly. Which like you can have that, but if you're going to make a film, it's just a different medium. So it requires a different criteria to kind of technically be a successful thing. And so I think that they kind of wrote themselves in a corner with this where there wasn't much to draw from, but the goal, the objective for them would have been to create that, create something around it.
So the thing you're hitting on there, though, is I think there is a world where we got that movie that you just described where they did a thing with it, but this movie is made by Illumination, who, has built their bread and butter is the Minions. And listen.
The best thing they've brought is Sing, and that's annoying for some people, but... Yes, you're right.
I'm just going to say, I don't know how much I've expressed on this podcast. I hate the Minions. I think Despicable Me. I can't.
They're very annoying to me. People love them, but I do not.
I'm not the Minions. Okay, I don't like So the thing about those Despicable Me movies plus Minions is very similar to this movie. There's not really a story. There is the most basic version of an arc and a character. I think the first Despicable Me actually does contain that, but it's really more of a series of really cutesy vignettes that are like tied together.
Yeah.
That's the movie. And this movie and the Super Mario Brothers feels exactly like that.
And the characters in this, as we mentioned, like they're not fleshed. If you ask me, like, give me 5 characteristics about each one of these characters, you might be able to pick 1 or 2, because they all are kind of wooden and kind of one thing, they represent one thing. And so that's, that was a challenge and they didn't really solve it here with the movie. And so, yeah, I mean, this is definitely, it captures the essence, but that only goes so far, even stretched at, what is it, this movie, 82 minutes?
It's like 92,
92 minutes, so like that still feels too long for it almost because it's so thin. There's not much
You say that, but I actually kind of wish it was longer, but I don't know. It was funny, me and my fiance Laron saw this, and our thing was, that was too short. I wanted more, but I think the more I wanted wasn't more like gameplay. So it was more like story or something to kind of really get me invested. Sure. I don't know, Caleb, did you think this movie did a good job capturing the essence or kind of what makes a Mario game fun?
Yeah, actually, I think they do. There are several scenes that are set pieces that throughout the movie are just kind of action platformers. There's a part where they're running through the city. That is like, feels very much like that's what's going on right there. There's even, allusions to the flagpole in this scene, and there is scenes where the allusion is more to like Mario 64, where they like really pan back and they're jumping over these mushrooms and you see the Mushroom Kingdom in the background. It feels like they're discovering like you do in Mario 64. When they're in different zones, they're doing different things, and there's always these little set pieces that are very, I think, distinct to making you feel like they're in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. I actually agree with you, Caleb. Ron's not wrong.
No,
there needs to be more for sure.
Yeah.
But I did really, that was the thing. It did give me that rush as a guy who's played the games where you're like, oh, they're doing the platformer and they are using a lot of nostalgic music, like deeply nostalgic music cues for me in a way that just really gets me like fired up and excited. And they are thrilling sequences, I think. And then you also have the Mario Kart sequence, which is super duper fun.
Yeah.
Like there's just a lot of those pieced together. Because that's the thing, even characters going from one location to another barely makes sense in this movie. Like, so I just wish there was more to prop it up, but I did think the sequences within themselves were super duper fun, kind of connecting from A to B to C. Yeah. And they all tended to flow into each other fairly well. There was very little downtime in this short runtime.
I'll tell you this, like it doesn't exactly I don't think it necessarily works altogether successfully as a film, but I will say that it did make me want to play the game again. So
Yeah.
And you know what I said earlier?
And if
This is
that's-
basically a giant Mario controller.
If that's what
or
it's if
commercial.
that is the objective, then they succeeded on that front. So
I will say that the first act lacks for me. It's actually, I sat down and realized, oh my, I have to go to the restroom. And so I was very acutely aware of the time the entire time.
Oh, no.
And at 30 minutes in, they are still in Brooklyn.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So that first act is shockingly slower than you think it is.
I mean, we did get the one, there's a good, I mean, at least I thought it was funny, the gag with the dog where they're trying to be plumbers.
Yeah.
And that one did go, wow, that's kind of shocking. We have to meet Mario's family, I guess. Also,
just to
And
forget them
Spike,
later.
I'm not sure that was necessary. That is such a
apparently
deep cut.
It's a super duper deep cut
Yeah.
from the construction crew game. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Also, how old is Mario? Because apparently he still lives with his parents, has a full-blown mustache, but then he has like his bedroom looks like that of like a 15-year-old.
Yeah.
Yeah. But all that tracks, right? Like they're trying to give you this family vibe, and they're both Mario needs to be the avatar Mario and the child who plays Mario at the same time. So it didn't bother me that they smushed them together so clumsily.
It didn't bother me per se. It's not a drawback, but it was clumsy. I was
It
like,
is clumsy.
You're like, what's
Yeah.
going on here? Well, what do you guys think? You already mentioned Spike, Caleb. What would you say is maybe your favorite nod or cameo that you would like to share?
I have probably two. There's a moment where they're deep in the bowels of Brooklyn and they break through a brick wall, and the negative space that's left behind is the pixel shadow of Mario's head.
That's fun.
And it was just such a small little thing that they didn't need to do that I just kind of was like, I like that. And then the red girders in the Donkey Kong land as a nod to the game Donkey Kong, I thought was pretty
fun.
cute. Yeah.
So yeah, Mario fights Donkey Kong, which that's one of my favorite sequences. We get the DK rap for Donkey Kong's intro music, which is a terrible, terrible rap, but I love it so dearly from Donkey Kong 64.
Yeah.
That was a really nice touch that didn't have to be there, but being there really put a grin on my face. Laron, how about you?
I think my favorite character period was Bowser. I just think that like that musical number playing into who Jack Black is with Tenacious D, that's just fun. That's a lot of fun. Like, and it's not really a nod, more so much as it is just a nod to who the actor playing it is. But also, but from a gaming standpoint, what I really appreciated was the kind of design your own custom go-kart sequence. That was a lot of fun because that's what I remember doing is like putting together my cool little thing and then being that character. And then like once I assembled the perfect thing, then I wanted to do that all the time. So
and then you had some douchebag who drove up in a giant monster truck right next to you.
Did you guys watch this in theater or did you have a screening?
Yeah, we watched it in theaters.
Yeah.
So when Toad pulls up in the big monster truck like you were alluding to, our theater erupted. It could the laughter didn't stop for like quite a while. It was such a simple moment, but it really did land, and it landed in our theater for sure.
I really think kids are going to love this movie.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy that the kids have a good Mario movie versus all of us that had a very bad, confusing
it's
Mario
significantly better than the other one with the live action with real actors.
I remember when I finally rented that. I think I was probably like 6 or 7. I was like, I finally get to see it. I get to watch the Mario movie, and you turn on, and you're like, what is this?
Right.
This isn't anything like Mario. Yeah.
Did they make a Street Fighter movie as well?
Oh yeah.
I never saw it, but I remember it. I know that it
Raul
exists.
Julia's last movie. Right?
Oh wow! Should I watch it? I don't know. Okay, cool.
Okay,
maybe not.
Got
like
it. That's why I didn't see
Raul Julia still acts like the like every scene out of existence.
Oh
like,
yeah,
he is amazing. It's just literally everyone else is trash.
Got it.
So I would still say watch it.
I mean, if you're curious, I'd say check it out.
Curious because I played the game, so I'll watch it.
So, what letter grade would we give the Super Mario Brothers movie, Laron Chapman?
I'm gonna go right with like a 70%. So I'm gonna go with a C with this, and I think that's a pure nostalgic grab because I really do think, while I'm saying this is mediocre and mid, it's not without its delights and pleasures. It's just that they're kind of few and far between, and it's very specific. And anytime something is so specific, I worry about whether like this is not going to be for many people. But, you know, that's okay. And everything doesn't have to be for everybody. So, I mean, I think, like you said, kids will like this. And I think fans of Mario, like hardcore fans of Mario, will like it because they'll get all of the references. I just think,
I genuinely think those are the two groups. They were like, when they started making the movie, like, who is this for? Mario fans and kids.
Yeah. There are a lot of those because it's doing very well at the box office.
Tracking at, okay, listeners, by the time you're hearing this, you'll know the outcome. But as of this recording on a Friday evening, this movie is tracking to have a 5-day between Wednesday to Sunday of $200 million, which is unheard of for any first film in any franchise.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Caleb Haldane, letter grade.
I think you're right on again with C. And that is, again, with its caveats of like, that doesn't make it a terrible movie. A C is still a very solid grade. But unlike if the D&D movie came on my TV, I wouldn't change it off. If the Mario movie came on my TV, I would wait for Peaches, and then next channel.
Right. You don't need to invest the 90 minutes again.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. This is one of those where, I mean, the one thing it has going for it is it's super short, so I could definitely see myself just breezing through it if I turn it on streaming when I'm going to bed or something because it's so short. But I don't really have a ton of interest in revisiting this, even though I think it's super charming. As a Mario fan, I might, like I said, passively watch it. But fan rating would be a B, in that I think it has tons of fan service for fans young and old. All those moments put big dumb grins on my face the whole time, even if I know I'm being totally hyper targeted as the group of people. I normally criticize movies for overuse of fan service, but given that we have not had a Mario movie proper, or even very many good video game movies at all, I was like, you know what? B for the fans. For the movie rating, this gets a D. And honestly, I think the two things it has going for it as a movie are the visuals are actually pretty impressive, especially for an Illumination film. That's another thing about Illumination I don't like. I think most of their movies actually look pretty bad. Considering their budget. This one I think actually looks outstanding. And I did really love the video game score riffs. They incorporate a lot of classic, just all sorts of Mario music cues throughout the score that plays in the movie. That said, there is some times when it weirdly turns into a generic score, which I was like, why would you do that? You have like
so many things to pull from.
So many incredible, memorable scores. But anyway, so visuals and the score are kind of the things where I would give and Jack Black. Jack Black is great. I think what you were saying, Laron, how they kind of played to his strengths as an actor. That's what I wanted for every single character.
And so, unfortunately, there were just a few standouts in that sense. So.
Their use of color was, I thought, remarkably good.
It looked visually, it was very impressive. The diversity of environments, the Mushroom Kingdom was just like, wow. It's like, again, if I was a kid watching it, I'd feel like I was in a candy store, you know? What else would we recommend alongside the Super Mario Brothers movie? Laron Chapman, I'll start with you.
Like I said, this was a 90-minute trailer for the game. So I say go play the game. I feel like everything you feel in this 90 minutes, you can feel for 5 hours at night.
Which game, Laron?
Oh, I'm going to be terrible at this because I haven't played them in so long and I'm not good with systems. But I think it was Mario. So what was it on? Okay, so Mario Kart.
Right.
But there's different versions of that.
8 of them, to be exact.
Okay, so was it on Xbox?
No.
Okay, was it on...
Always on Nintendo stuff.
Always on Nintendo, okay.
Never not Nintendo.
Okay, it had the big toggle, the really big toggle.
N64?
Must have been
N64, yeah.
So it's Mario Kart 64.
Yeah. Mario Kart 64.
Which, by the way, Switch owners, I know Nintendo just served us a giant commercial, and I'm about to serve you another commercial. You too can play Mario Kart 64 if you have a Nintendo Switch online with the expansion pass right now. Nintendo, give me that check.
See, it was a trailer for it. I knew it. The trailer for the game. We're advertising the game.
Nintendo, send me those royalty checks any day. Caleb Haldane, what else would you recommend alongside the Super Mario Brothers movie?
It's so funny because I'm using the same hack that Laron made, but I was gonna say like this scratches the same itch like watching speed runs of Super Mario 64, like that is just so fun for me to watch those. And I would say, so like watch that type of media. There's lots of media on YouTube that I think does cover Super Mario well, with its speed runs, or if it's full playthroughs, or if it's just people, chatting about Mario.
There's also, we haven't mentioned, there's the 2 games, the Super Mario Maker games, in which Nintendo gave gamers the tools they needed to build their own Mario game of any variety.
Those are super fun.
Those are super good. And there's tons of YouTube content on that too. I'm going to go in a different direction, though I will note, if I was going to recommend one Mario game, I would probably, man, there's so many, they're so good. Mario Odyssey on the Switch is a bona fide banger, but my favorite is still probably Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2. Unfortunately, the only one available on the Nintendo Switch is Super Mario Galaxy, and you have to get it as part of the 3D All-Stars collection. I know that probably just made no sense to most people, but Super Mario Galaxy is the one you really want to play. The way they innovate, that was the first game they introduced a gravity mechanic in which you jump around planets, and the physics in it was really innovative when it came out in 2007, and I still have not found another game that uses it quite the same way. So that's my favorite Mario game. My recommendations are actually going to be other movies that I think did adapt IP really clever in a clever fashion, and very well to make great movies. The first up, the Lego Batman movie. Bet you didn't think a Lego Batman movie could be good. Bet you thought that was going to be just for the kids. Actually, it's got tons of references for the adults. It's super meta, but there's a lot of heart at the core of the story, and the characters, even the ones you already know, have a very strong traits about them that are very memorable.
Yeah, I agree.
And unfortunately, I read in prep for this, we're never going to get a sequel because apparently Universal now owns Lego, and the Lego Batman movie, of course, Batman being a Warner Brothers property.
Everything with Universal just falls to shit.
Yeah.
I'm looking at you, Tom Cruise and the Mummy.
I'm also going to give a shout out to Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, reinventing the character. That movie is probably the biggest innovation in 3D animations since Toy Story, and I'm not even exaggerating. Yeah. And we're already seeing, there was a trailer in front of, for us, for the new Ninja Turtles movie in front of Mario, and I was like, wow, this is really, it pops. It's a unique art style, and we would definitely not have gotten an animation style like that for Ninja Turtles had Spider-Verse not kind of paved the way for it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I just think that movie is a masterpiece, and yes, I am very excited for Across the Spider-Verse.
I'm going to go on a limb and say Speed Racer by the Wachowskis.
Also good.
Actually a good adaptation of a game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we talked about that.
But it's not an anime.
Yeah. Sorry, excuse me. Sorry. Yeah, you're right. Absolutely right. Thanks for that.
It is a great movie, though.
It's a great movie, though. Yeah, and I think that was that gives me an idea that they would be good at a game, as you mentioned previously. You know,
I think Wachowskis probably are gamers, and I think they get it.
Yeah.
Detective Pikachu from just a couple of years ago. You know, I'm not saying that movie was a masterpiece, but it did, for me, capture a lot of what I like about Pokemon, which is you're living in a world with these creatures that are just so heightened versions of things we already know. And there's the crazy corporate conspiracies, and there's all these like dynamics that I enjoy about the Pokemon games that I thought made a successful adaptation to the big screen. And again, not complicated, but had a character arc that I was invested in from beginning to end. And lastly, this one specifically for the adults, not the kids, probably one of the better video game adaptations I've ever seen, Arcane on Netflix. It is adapting the League of Legends games. I didn't even know League of Legends had a mythology until I watched this series, and wouldn't you know it, wow, it's incredible. And also really pushing the boundaries of what's possible in animation, just visually spectacular Netflix series.
In that same vein, Cyberpunk Edgerunners was a good great storytelling. Yeah.
Great. I just haven't finished that. I got halfway through. It's good.
Yeah.
And the animation is stunning. So check that out. So Cyberpunk Edgerunners, also on Netflix. All right, gentlemen, we've come to the end of our show where we have to go into a Super Smash Brothers style throwdown. It's on like Donkey Kong. Listeners can only see one movie this weekend. Do they go to a theater to see Mario power up, or do they cave and watch Chris Pine roll a D20? Caleb Haldane, which one would you pick?
Just because I think that Dungeons and Dragons casts a much wider net, I'm going to default to that one. But there's going to be some people out there that I think the Mario Brothers is going to be a bigger win for them. But like I said, the D&D movie's casting just a much wider net. It's going to be so much easier to go ahead and vouch for that movie and be pretty sure that they're going to enjoy it.
Yeah, have some laughs. Laron Chapman?
I got to default to D&D for sure. I think if you're a big fan of Mario, then you know that's for you. I just think that D&D, you can take the whole family and everybody's going to get something from it. You know, so I think it's fail proof in that sense.
Yeah, I would say, beyond if you're not a Mario fan and you're an adult, you're going to get way more out of Dungeons and Dragons. Your kids are probably going to like either one.
Yeah.
But Mario really only works if you also love Mario.
Yeah.
So I'm going to align with you guys. And I just think Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves is an all-around better movie. It's more fun. It's more accessible, casts a wider net. And it's just they just tell a better story. I hate to say, sorry, Mario. Sorry, Shigeru Miyamoto. One of my most, I basically worship the ground that man walks on. But he's just, storytelling in movies is not his thing, unfortunately. Stick to the games. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is all we have time for today. I want to make sure our listeners can keep up with all the things you guys are doing. You guys are both very busy, active gentlemen. Caleb Haldane, where can people follow you online?
I have been kind of MIA online as of late, so probably you'll be able to see Red 6 come back after SoonerCon. So I wouldn't expect too much from us until after June.
Can't wait for SoonerCon though. It's gonna be great. You guys by the way, you guys' social ads are killing it. Love the new. You guys had some rebranding. It's super cool.
Yeah,
love to see it. Laron Chapman.
Yeah, I'm currently hunkered down on a television series shooting here called Fairwood in Oklahoma City, and so that as a production coordinator, so that's sucking up most of my time. But if you want to follow my reviews on online, you can follow them at black_Cine_man on Letterboxd. So, or you can follow me on social media at Laron Chapman.
Awesome. And as always, you can find me tweeting about films, television, video games. If you want video games opinions, that's pretty much the only place I express those anymore. You can find that on Twitter at CMastersTalk. You can also find me on Instagram posting miscellaneous photos or my movie reviews also on Letterboxd. All of those at CMastersTalk. That is letter C, Masters Talk. Caleb Haldane, thanks so much for joining us. It's been way too long. I promise it won't be 3 years before I invite you back next time.
All right.
And Laron, as always, sir, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
And listeners, thank you so much for rolling the dice with us today. We'll catch you again next time when we return for yet another double feature. That's right. In our next episode, we're going to be discussing 2 different horror comedies. ? Renfield and Evil Dead Rise. Catch you again next time.